What's up, YouTube? It's James from Robin Henry Watches. Today we're going to get into Hodinkee, the rise and the potential objective commentary of their leveling downwards.
So you really danced around the word fall there, didn't you?
Yeah, listen, I want to keep it objective. This isn't a piss on Hodinkee video, because when I started collecting watches in 2012, which was 4 years after Hodinkee started, I was on Hodinkee every day for probably 6 years. And it was massively useful in my journey of learning knowledge and entertainment with watches and watch community, because back then I didn't know anyone into watches, so it was my only kind of link to the community. So, you know, it's been massively positive for me. So, however, I've been disconnected from Hodinkee now for probably about 4 years.
I wonder why.
Exactly.
It's definitely my go-to anyway for watches, for sure.
Has been for a lot of people, but a lot of people disconnected. So I guess that's a good place to kind of start, you know. Right, so let's get into the birth of Hodinkee. So Ben Clymer founded Hodinkee back in 2008. He had a brief career in finance, and he started this blog. He was kind of like a lot of us off. He had his grandfather had given him this kind of Omega Speedmaster, which was quite an unusual reference really at the time. It's not like crazy, like different, but it's just, it wasn't popular. But anyway, this gave him the thing to start Hodinkee. It was a blog, and he had this good way of explaining things, conversing with the audience, demystifying kind of horological terms and technicalities, and it was just kind of, you could kind of warm to him. His personality came through, and his original, let's call them crew, were all kind of like-minded people, and they were kind of the main characters, which are, you know, a lot of us kind of really connected with.
And I think that's an important point, is I think a lot of people will see where the re-rise is going to come from, and it's kind of where his timeline with Hodinkee
to a certain point. I mean, at first it was just a blog and it was just a passion, which is the best way to kind of start any business and see it through. But when they first started, obviously, to commercialize it, which they had to, and which they should do as well, you know, as a capital enterprise, you can't be doing it for nothing. They felt quite organic, and they were good, you know, so like it was like straps, you know, that they were posting out, and other kind of, you know, small things. And then probably my favorite part of the commercial enterprise and success was their weekly vintage watch drops. They would used to do it on a Wednesday. Apparently the fridge just decided to open.
Oh, it's the haunted fridge again.
Anyway, so they would do this weekly drop, which was really popular at the time. Now, it was popularized by Amsterdam Vintage Watches. I've got to mention them in every video that I do.
Not sponsored.
Hodinkee did it. I'm pretty sure it was Wednesdays, and they would drop like 6, 7, 8 watches, and they would be very open, and they had this way of like putting them out there where like what we love about it, what you need to know about it, you know, as in faults with, you know, the watch.
It didn't feel commercial.
No, it felt honest. They put the watches out and they sell out like that, and you'd be like, okay.
It was organic, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't feel like someone's trying to push sales down your neck.
Absolutely.
It was, here's what we've got, it's really cool because of this. Fellow watch nerds, buy the stuff because
I think the shop launched in about 2012.
And was Ben Clymer part of that? Is that
he was running the company. He was the CEO.
And that's what I mean. I think the timeline of success and failures does tend to.
And there were some great, you know, people on, you know, that were writing for them. You know, Stephen Pulverin, if I'm getting the surname correct. Jack Forster. You know, some of those sort of people that were writing for the blog at the time, and it didn't feel too forced. And then at some point they did introduce kind of editorial that was sponsored. And even then, you'd be like, well, they got to do their odd thing, like they were doing.
But they still had that kind of underdog vibe. You wanted them to succeed. And look, it to be a thing.
Brother's got to get paid, you know. Fair enough to him, you know. Like they can't be doing this for free, you know. He's paying people, you know. Even when they did like the shows, you know, Basel World, which is obviously now defunct and you know, dead. But you know, when they went up there, it was like a big thing. Like everyone, you'd be there, like watching the blog of the new releases fly out. And when you compared it to other blogs out there, like even like a blog to watch, you know, it just felt at a different level. Like he just got the whole aesthetic of the site right. It felt like Apple versus Android, you know, to other blogs.
So that's mainly what resonated with you from Ben Clymer's story.
Yeah.
I think that's important. Is like the tipping point between when it was that that underdog vibe I was talking about, and when it felt commercial, I think that goodwill of wanting them to make their little bit of bank does dry up quite quickly.
So then after the vintage watches, that's when they started to do the odd partnership, and this was still good because they would they would work with even big brands like Omega, Tag Heuer, like the Tag Heuer Skipper. That was a cool watch. The Skipper, which is now a commercial range, product in their range for Tag Heuer. It was that link up with Hodinkee, who were like, this is a really cool reference in your back catalogue. Yeah. Let's do this. So they would always be quite faithful to the originals there. So they did some great ones there. There was Zenith as well.
So which one was the big game changer for you that they did a major brand collaboration with?
The Tag Heuer Skipper stands out as one for sure. Even the one, which kind of started Ben's passion in watches, the Omega Speedmaster. They did a rerun of that, and for now, when that one came out, the actual secondary values, which were in the floor, suddenly they shot up a little bit. Not that that's part of calling it successful per se, but I just felt they were quite authentic, and they were done for collectors that they wouldn't be in 42mm sizes. They would be in smaller references. They'd have great straps with them. They wouldn't have stupid things on them, which they would remove date windows, things like that, which true vintage collectors generally like.
So it goes on really to say that he is credible, and people were following him and buying these watches because of Ben Clymer, right?
Yeah, well, I think the other kind of major thing that they did was their move into digital video content. Obviously, they birthed almost by accident Talking Watches, which obviously the first episode was with John Mayer. That at the time it hadn't been done in that format and that popularity, and then suddenly it's like, oh, there's other people that do this.
Well, whereas everything's come and gone, that still survives.
Yeah, it has, and that started, and that was awesome. The early years of that were great. They were hugely successful.
Of course, Hodinkee remained objective and unaffected by their brand partnerships.
That's a good link to the beginning of the change. I'm not going to say the beginning of the end, but was when they took on investment. So back in 2020, Hodinkee secured roughly about $40 million of investment, led by TCG Capital Management, with participation,
which is not a front for an evil Bond villain,
LVMH Luxury, which they always kept saying is a very minority stake. LVMH, the huge conglomerate. Do you know what I remember at the time thinking? I was like, why do you need $40 million? Why do you need investment? To me, from the outside at the time, it felt like they're growing organically, they're growing commercially, they're doing sponsored content, they're doing the vintage watches, and then it's like, okay, right, we're going to be an authorized dealer for brands, but only online. Although there was talk of this property space that they bought in New York to have a boutique. And that's where things started to get a bit cloudy. Not just my view on it, but I think everyone, if we're being objective, was like, there was challenging questions being asked. Well, LVMH has got a stake in your business. When you review an LVMH brand watch, can you really call it a dog? No, you can't. And they were like, we've got editorial freedom. People started questioning it. And then you've got these I'm talking big sponsorships. Let's say, I remember they did a big shoot with IWC. Was all this video content adverts, they did all this massive shoot, which must cost a fortune. It's like, you can't then go and be critical of IWC. No. You just can't. And they never really were. Now listen, someone might point out one article where they maybe question something, but they were never. Even if something was bad, they would touch on a point.
Diplomatic.
They'd be very diplomatic, and then go and talk about all the things that they thought were great about it. And suddenly you're looking at this and you're like, I'm not buying this. It doesn't feel organic now, it doesn't feel real, it feels forced, and there's too many commercial inputs going in. And that's when some of their big editors left, that we had been used to for years, and suddenly you're reading stuff and you're like, yeah, I mean.
And where was Ben at this stage?
So yeah, he stepped down as CEO in 2021, and I was a bit like, okay, I mean, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, this is your company, you do what you want. Then there was this other thing, a bit random. I didn't actually kind of researched into this bit, but other people who've really been watching will notice this. It was all like, look at our Porsches, like our vintage Porsche collections and our random like visual. You were like, what the f? It felt a little bit of like
Lost its way.
lost its way, and like rubbing your face. Like, okay, dude, obviously you've made a load of money. Not everyone's got this like vintage Porsche collection. You used to always be taught, oh yeah, I moved out of New York. You know, I live upstate now, and you know, I come in, and it all felt a bit odd.
Well, this leads me on to the question I was going to ask, basically. So it's like, what do you think the biggest challenges they faced from this more aggressive business approach rather than that organic approach that we've been discussing?
It's because no longer then obviously they brought in new CEO who was, you know, obviously more allegedly experienced, you know, to run a big, you know, what was coming a big kind of company. You've got all these commercial interests. You haven't just got the funding from your investors who you have to, basically you're working for them, right? You've also got all of your sponsors, which was like every major brand bar Rolex. And then the big one came, you know, they purchased Crown and Caliber, the secondary pre-owned retail. And Crown and Caliber was big in its own right in the US. For those of us, you know, Europe and UK, we don't really know the brand that well, but it had a massive, like 40 people, I believe, watchmakers, 40 like workshop, massive pre-owned watch seller. And then they're like, oh, this isn't going to change anything. And then it's like, they've got all of these brands now they're carrying as AD. So that's going back to your question, you know, more interference, because you can't, your brand that you're selling in your shop and that you're the authorized dealer for, you've got the investment, and then you've got all of the sponsorship money coming in for your adverts. So it's like, at this point, you've already sold your soul. Like, there's no way out of this. You can't be independent and objective, or even have subjective comments when you're reviewing things, which is what we liked about Hodinkee. You need to say, like, if you're looking at, you know, a dog, it is what it is. You know, square is a circle is a circle, call it for what it is. And especially the Crown and Caliber, it was like sending out emails like, I have $150 off this weekend. You're like, what are you, Joe in the shop?
I was literally just about to mention, like, how did the internal drama taking on Crown and Caliber acquisition shake up the whole Hodinkee brand image?
I mean, the other thing is well, one, I think it obviously was not positive because they just weren't credible. They had so many commercial interests to balance. It was like, forget about the editorial. We've got to be pumping on all cylinders.
That's the crux of it. It's not just about selling your soul and the editorial integrity, but it's about losing the original soul of what it was meant to be.
100%.
People fell in love with it.
They couldn't keep up with it. They pumped all this like investment into it, which they didn't earn. And that's why, maybe that's being a bit critical, but I just felt like they should have stayed on the journey that they were on. They were making great money from what it appeared, unless I'm, you know, wrong, but they must have been to get that investment right. Just keep doing it and do it organically and a bit slower. And then, of course,
when someone slaps 40 million on your desk and says, do you want it?
Yeah, but so they take on Crown and Caliber in 2021. Well, the market is obviously up here right now. And then guess what? The back end fell out. I think at that point, obviously, they started becoming under serious financial strain because suddenly they bought all of this stock priced up here. They've got to sell it down here. And the overheads of running a big pre-owned business, it's not a payroll that I'd want to be footing the bill for.
It's not a moneymaker, it's a burden, but it's what started everything.
A massive burden. And I can only guess as an outsider looking in, that the business was badly managed because they had all this investment, they had all these they were still bringing in great money from sponsorship. They're selling authorized dealer watches, you know, new, and that's on great margins. You know, the vintage watch thing almost got flicked out the way.
And that's probably where you have to wonder is, why wasn't there a pivot point where they sat there and went, we are a mess, we don't know who we are. Do we fully lean into those sponsorships and go all in and say, look, integrity out the window, we are a marketing vehicle for this now, or do we pivot all the other way, throw all that out? And
I think well, obviously what started the change was the layoffs.
I was just about to say, I really wanted to mention, sorry to jump in, but is it to do with losing such credible journalism or journalists that were there from the start?
Yeah, massively. So not only was there that, but they had to start laying off all of the kind of the back end staff that helped run such a big machine. Watchmakers, they were letting them all go, and I'm like, what are you doing? These people are hard to find. They got rid of their workshop at Crown and Caliber, and you're like, what? Like, that's like a servicing department at a garage.
Money.
That's your bread and butter of money coming in all the time. back-end staff for the shops were being laid off, you know, at Hodinkee, at Crown and Caliber. And there was this thing, like, the staff were like posting, yeah, I was in this round of layoffs. And it became this big thing. They kept laying people off. You're like, okay, no, well, then they lay more people off. Then they lay more people off. There was these rounds.
It's always a hard decision to do.
And then it had to come to the point where we got to earlier this year. And about time, Ben Clymer kind of was like, enough is enough. Like, this is going to serious. And he did a very open and...
it was bold.
Yeah, bold, humble.
Needed.
But I mean, listen, he had to at this point, but
Yeah, definitely.
he didn't have to, but he did. Statement like, yeah, we've completely lost our way as a company. All these stupid emails giving you $150 off is ridiculous. We've completely lost our way. We're going to get back to editorial content. We're not buying any more pre-owned stock. We're going back to our roots.
Yeah.
So on that theme of how they're getting back to basics, Crown and Caliber for me is one of the most interesting parts of this, because they're like, okay, we're not, in his statement, he's like, we're not going to do that anymore. And I thought, oh, they're just going to stop for a while or slow things down, maybe a little pivot, keep Crown and Caliber, or maybe integrate it under the Hodinkee name. No.
Sack, breeze block, ditch.
So it's done.
Dead.
All the stock's gone. So whether they were just able to sell it all off cheap, or whether they used dealer networks to sell it, offload it cheap. So Hodinkee have managed to purchase Crown and Caliber at, I don't know how many millions they paid for it in 2021. And now in 2024, that to me is odd. Like, why not sell it?
So is it fully shot? Fully shot?
Dead.
Done.
Stock gone.
Okay.
Everything's
Everything
gone.
must
Like,
go.
how do you take a business that had, like, allegedly, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, about 40 people in their watch department workshop.
Yeah.
They're selling millions of pounds worth of stock. Hodinkee get hold of it. And listen, the market was turbulent, so fine, maybe you need to bring things down a bit. But to wipe it out, to it be like, we're losing that much money? They literally couldn't have handled that any worse. So whatever the management structure is at Hodinkee, they have to go. Like, you can't take a massive enterprise like that and run it into the ground in like 3 years.
It does make you wonder, though, at what point was it actually pronounced dead? Because this might be the exit strategy, but it might have been dead for the last 2 years already.
Well, obviously, yes, it was on the decline, and yes, it must have been losing the money for a considerable time. And listen, all of us back in 2021, 21 was great. 22, that's when the first cracks started coming in, and 23 was obviously transition. We all had months where we lost money. Now, depending on what your exposure was, mine was very minimal. I mean, obviously, I'm like nothing compared to what Crown and Caliber was. Funnily enough, now my business is far larger than Crown and Caliber. Which I don't think
There's your new tagline.
bigger than Crown, more successful than Crown and Caliber. But listen,
There's a meme
but
in that.
they were over leveraged massively. Obviously, they were obviously overpaying. But I don't understand why there wasn't a period of pain. Move that stock out at a loss, buy in new stock at new prices, and just downscale the business. But anyway, it's done. They're going back to, you know, core journalism, and there have already been some interesting signs of rebirth, regrowth. So they've got to learn from all of their failings. You know, this rapid growth, we've seen it in some other watch businesses, which you mentioned off camera, you know, where they blew up very quick, and you know, maybe they were a masseuse before. You know, it is what it is.
Of both people and finances.
Yeah, so they've got to reconnect with the watch community. And so far the reaction has been positive. They're getting back to that video content, but they've still got a long way to come back, because also, how do they save this as a commercial enterprise? They still have the same problems that they had before. Okay, fine, you put out a statement. Fine, you're saying that your integrity is going to come back, but you still have sponsors. You're still an authorized dealer. How will they go from here?
So tell me, how are they going from here? What is going to change? What is coming back to shift it back to the roots?
Long form content.
Jack Forster once did this long article about the history of spring bars, which sounds objectively extremely boring. But it was like this amazing article.
So much in there.
This guy just could turn like a really boring subject into something that you would read for 15, 20 minutes.
But that's great journalism. Yeah, I was going to say
well, we agreed.
Exactly, great journalism.
They've got to get back to great journalism. They might have to go, hat in hand to some of their old editors. They've got to find a way to distance themselves from some of the brands. Like, this is going to be a bad analogy, but I'm going to try and keep it as professional as possible.
You've never done that before.
I know, right?
We laugh because his analogy.
You're sleeping with someone for a long time. You want to break up. You know that they don't want to break up, and maybe you live in their apartment and you're financially dependent on them, but you've got to strike out on your own, and you'll be better for it. There'll be some short-term pain, and I think they've got to look at all of the brands that they're authorized dealers for. That's got to be shrunk down. I think they should go back to their vintage roots.
But it frees you,
right? The market isn't so turbulent in the vintage watch market. It's way more interesting. It connects with the community, and a lot of us that have collected watches for a long time, you go vintage.
And if you've got the knowledge behind to back it up, it can give you credibility.
True.
So if you don't know what you're talking about, it damages your credibility. But if you know what you talk about, selling vintage watches over new gives you heaps of credibility.
They don't need to sell so many new brands. Like, do you need to sell 20 new brands? I don't know how many they sell. It's probably not 20, but... And they've just got to go back to finding a way to really reach people with soft, organic advertising, in there, embedded in there, where it doesn't feel distasteful. And that's what they'll make their money, because they can get their money from their sponsors. They've got to have some commercial input in there.
The kids, they've got to find stuff they're passionate about before they get paid to talk about it.
They've got to be more open to criticizing stuff that they don't like. And that'll gain trust back. Is Omega sticking out, 42 millimeter giant fat watches, always such an amazing thing to be blowing your load about? The point is that they've got to start being more critical of things which they genuinely don't like. That's what I would say.
No, I agree.
Can't, be saying this is made. They've got to be more objective. I guess they've got to get more on the ground of their journalism in a lot of areas as well. But only time will tell. Can they save it? I mean, will Ben Clymer get more involved?
Some of this is on the brands as well, as I think. It's about if you do well as a brand, people will talk positively about you. But if there are no credible journalists, because they're all on your payroll, they're all too scared about speaking negatively about you, you'll never get that organic, positive treatment as well.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think it is on the brands. That's their job, to pump their product.
Yeah.
I think this is on Hodinkee. They're the ones that have got to set this is our ethics, this is our integrity, and this is where the line is of what we're going to do and what we won't do for your brand. Well, listen, it's still the #1 in the world, and there's a lot of great things about it, so they've just got to find their way back. But I'd be interested to hear other people's comments. What should they do? How's their way back?
How do you see Hodinkee balancing fresh ideas while staying true to the watch, community?
That's not my problem. That's their problem. That's Ben Clymer's problem. The best thing, the best products out there or services, whatever, I don't know what I want as a consumer. You've got to give it to me, right?
Absolutely.
I didn't know I wanted an iPhone. I didn't know I wanted this or that. So it's for them. It's like new music. When something new comes out, musically or whatever, you don't know what it is. Like, you got to sell it to me. You got to put it out there.
And to use one of your analogies, as much as Ben seems to be a decent, good egg, Ben raised the child, and then Ben put it up for adoption.
Yeah,
and now he's asked for it back.
So I don't
got to figure out what happened.
That's the answer that they've got to. I mean, essentially, it comes back to reconnecting with the watch community in a genuine way. But they're going to have to come up with the answers for that. They took the $40 million. They signed the deal with the devil.
I want to know where the 40 million went.
Crown Colour got it.
But do you think they're going to make a solid comeback?
Yeah,
you do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Me too.
I think they will. I think, I don't know what level Ben Clymer will be involved in the future, but there's a lot of financial stakeholders. They can't afford for it to go down. And also, to be fair to them, there's still no rival to them. They have no equal. But to be fair, they're still the #1. Yeah, they slipped. They've taken a misstep, but they're still above everyone else.
There's no blog that appears professional in a way that a news site is to watches.
Like I said earlier
there's
on.
no other BBC News of watches other than Hodinkee. Everyone else is just a personal blog, a small ragtag group. The Hodinkees of yesteryear is what all the others are right now.
Like I said earlier on,
I don't even think they're there, really.
That's the site that I go to. I go to.
To be fair, there are some good ones, like, you know, like Fratello's good, Tide, and
Fratello's good.
watches.
Yeah, but I'd say they're
Hodinkee's
still
my go-to.
small. They don't feel like they've got that big corporate name behind it.
I agree.
Do you think they can?
Well, I don't think a corporate name is right.
You know what I
want
mean?
Corporate
Yeah.
a bit, but
Entity with balls.
yeah.
But do you think they can keep innovating while staying true?
Yeah.
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 Perfect.
They've got to find other ways. Like when they bought us, we didn't know we wanted talking watches,
No.
right?
Exactly.
So I think
Who's on it? I don't want to.
I think they'll come up with some stuff, and I think they're going to regroup and
Come up with a new best thing.
let's wait and see. It's for them to answer, though. I'm really interested. So I'd really like to hear from people. You know, what's your experience of interacting with Hodinkee? Have you stopped being involved in their community? Have you stuck with them all the way through? What's your thoughts on what went wrong? What they need to do to get right? I'm interested. You know, debate it out. So yeah, interesting. We'll soon see. Right, I think that was it. So I'm out. Bye. Ciao.
Like, subscribe.
Oh yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. Cheers.